Good morning and welcome everyone. This is the side webinar, Beyond Energy Communities, Collective Energy Action for a Faster, Inclusive and Diverse Energy Transition. My name is Silvia Salini and I'm part of the Sustainable Resources, Climate and Resilience team at ICLEI Europe. It will be my great pleasure to take you through what we expect to be quite a lively discussion today. The site is a research and innovation project funded, which kicked off in June 2020. And it's quite natural that actually we are getting to this point of debate in this very moment when the project is, let's say, a bit more mature in its own reflection. Along those 2.5 years of work together, one of the words that we have been encountering the most in our work is definition. Definition is coming from Latin. To define is defining, to specify, to fix, establishing. It's made of two parts. From one hand side, we have de, completely, and finire, to bound, to limit. So basically, to set the boundaries of something. When the site started, a lot of our attention was captured by the ongoing discussion around the newly back then proposed definition of citizens' energy communities and renewable energy communities, which are parts of two different EU directives. Those concepts are fundamental as they enable for the first time communities and individuals to have an active role not only in the energy market, but in the more broad movement for the energy transition. To focus on the best possible way for those two definitions to be translated, transposed in the legal framework of the different member states has been a big part of our work, and it still is extremely important. And Andreas will tell you a little bit about that later on. But what if those definitions, those boundaries, leaves out other initiatives that are working toward the same objective? What happened to those activities that jointly see people working towards the same goal of clean, decentralized, and more democratic energy system? The more we work with our 7 living labs and many other initiatives on the ground, the more we had questions around those definitions, those boundaries that have been set. For this reason, we decided to explore the possible meaning of collective energy action. And this is what we'd like to share with you today in order to collect your inputs and your ideas. The objective of the today webinar is not to convince anyone, really, but to exchange with open minds on the possibility for making energy transition faster and more inclusive, possibly. That's what we hope. So before getting into the substance, just a few housekeeping rules. I recall you that this workshop is recorded and will be posted online on the Decide website so that you can also go back and have a second look at it. We expect you as an audience to be part of the discussion and to engage. To do so, you can make use of the chat box, and if times allow, we will also enable you to speak up and pose your questions. But we also prepared something else for you, which is a set of pools question. I promise nothing too difficult, and just to make sure that you are following, you are there, you're present, we want to start with the first pool for you today, which is a very simple question. I asked my colleague Jennifer to put this up. Basic one to get to know who a little bit we have in the room. So the first question is, where are you connecting from? To give us a grasp, an idea of which kind of regions, which kind of country or cities do we have here represented? What is the geographical diversification? I see people are typing in. So we'll leave you a few more seconds. Last chance to tell us, where are you connecting from? Okay. I ask the colleague to share the results so that we can all see who are our fellow colleagues. I see we have quite a good diversification: Spain, Italy, Athens, Vienna, Prague. Greece seems to be quite present. New Zealand, wow, that must be quite late. Thank you for joining. And then second question that will tell us a little bit more of what perspective are you taking in this debate. So are you a researcher, a student? Are you a policymaker? Are you working as a consultant? Are you a policy analyst? Are you a member of community initiatives? Or are you just maybe interested? Of course, you can have more than one answer. And this, again, will help us in understanding who do we have in the room. I get a few more seconds. Time is up. So I ask my colleague to share the results. I see we have a good number of students. So this is back to school, but this is a bit back to school for everyone. Members of community initiatives also, which is very good. So we have a hands-on experience and direct opinion. And then consultants, of course, policymaker, and quite a number of others as well, which is interesting. Okay, so you are connected, you proved that. The audience is there. Let's see who else will be there with us today. So after this introduction, I will hand over to my colleague Andreas Turk from UNM Research, who are within the DECIDE project leading on this important part of monitoring the EU regulation development and transposition. And he will give an overview of the status of the transposition in the EU directives in member states. And then we will have a short Q&A moment for the most burning questions from you before passing to the colleague Liam Peters from Thinky, who is the coordinating partner of this DECIDE project, that will take us through this idea of integrating collective action in the clean energy package. And then a great set of panelists to open up the discussion and to feed with different perspectives from different fields, from hands-on, on-the-ground experiences to higher policy making level. We have Giulia Torri from Kilometer Zero Energy, who is active in the southern part of Spain, Catalonia especially, and is a decider participating in the DECIDE project. Ludwig Krag from Baum Consult, I DECIDE active partner from Germany. Lorraine Provost from Client Earth, German, Belgium-based office of environmental lawyer. And then Tim Taylor from Corimaco Thriving Communities in Slovenia. Achille, and last but not by any means the least, Achille Hanasset from the Directorate General for Energy from the European Commission. So I'm about to give Andreas the floor, but just before that, one other question for the audience that I asked the colleague to pull up, which is on the topic. We are going to discuss about collective energy action. And I would be curious to know from you participants, when you heard about this term, what would you think? Do you perfectly know what are we referring at? Do you have a general understanding, but not sure? It's something that you can imagine, but not sure at all? Or you just join exactly because you would like to learn more about this? I see numbers are quite varying. A lot of people are responding. Last second to let us know what is your take on collective energy action. Perfect. I asked the colleague to close the poll and we will see the results afterwards. And With no further ado, I give the floor to my colleague Andreas from UNEOM Research to tell us a little bit more on how the transposition of the community energy definitions are going in the different member states. Andreas, over to you.
Good morning from Austria. I will share my screen, 1 second. 1 moment. Here. Can you see my screen? I think you can.
It's not in full screen mode.
1 second. Then I will put it in full screen mode first. And then share again. Okay, better.
It's still not full
it's still the same, but maybe just go ahead, Andreas.
Yes.
I just go ahead. So my name is Andreas Türk, UNEOM Research Institute for Energy, Climate and Society Live. I'm monitoring the transposition in all EU 27 since 2 years. And I think I know a lot of details that I want to share with you, but I don't want to give you only a country overview, but also discuss with you some patterns and possible directions and shortcomings. Before I give you a country overview, I want to recap which clean energy package articles are we talking about in the context of collective energy actions. Everybody's speaking about renewable energy communities, but actually there's several articles. It's Article 21 of the recast of the Renewable Energy Directive, jointly acting renewable self-consumers. In most countries, it's called collective self-consumption, because this concept has been existing on the multi-apartment level since several years. For example, in Austria, we have multi-apartment energy sharing already since 2017. There's another important article, it's Article 15, Electricity Market Directive. It's on active consumers. And both articles mainly focus on activities and less on governance. Then we have 2 other articles, Article 22 of the Renewable Energy Directive, Renewable Energy Communities, RECs, and Article 15 of the Electricity Market Directive, Citizen Energy Communities, CECs. And these articles much more focus on the organizational format, governance, questions of autonomy to keep out traditional market players from having power. So we have a menu of articles, and a bit later we'll discuss to what extent did member states make use of this range of opportunities. Another slide. You can see that jointly acting renewable self-consumers, as well as renewable energy communities, they have some kind of boundaries, because the idea in the Renewable Energy Directive is to localize plants, to have decision makers in proximity of the installations. In case of jointly acting renewable self-consumers, it should be the same building or multi-apartment block, or member states could also decide on wider boundaries. Active consumers and citizen energy communities have no clear boundaries. Member states are free to define the boundaries very wide. This is the philosophy of the electricity market, not to have boundaries. The 2 articles of the RED 2, jointly acting renewable self-consumers, renewable energy communities, have not a focus to act on the markets. Of course, they can do via aggregators, but active consumers and citizen energy communities can directly act on markets. They like small market actors. Third-party ownership, important topic. It's possible for jointly acting renewable self-consumers and for active consumers. But of course, jointly acting renewable self-consumers and the active consumers they can themselves not be part of, they cannot themselves be active consumers. They can only be external parties. And another important point that is common for all the articles is the activities carried out should not be primary commercial or professional activities. This is a short intro, and then I will tell you what did the countries make out of this nice menu of options. This is what happens. Most countries have some basic definitions of renewable energy communities. The status is here June this year. Didn't update it after summer. The way renewable energy communities are defined varies a lot in detail. Some countries have very minimalistic definitions because they just wanted to survive the European deadline. Others have elaborated concepts, credible concept, because they really want to have this concept going. There are less countries that have already implemented the concept of citizen energy communities. Some countries have implemented renewable self-consumers. The reason is that these countries had the concept already before in form of collective self-consumption. But where we see the biggest vacuum is active consumers. There are hardly any concept how to operationalize this Article 15 of the Electricity Market Directive. If you want to have more details on the regulatory framework in the different countries, we have a special webpage. It's called Energy Communities Hub. It's quite recently updated, and you can get all the country details. But I mentioned earlier, I want to discuss with you some patterns. And as I just mentioned, the focus of the transposition was on renewable energy communities, as they resemble the known concept of energy cooperative. It's a more tangible concept. Citizen energy communities were transposed by a range of member states, but there's a lack of clear vision how they could operate. In Austria, for example, our law mentions citizen energy communities in 3 sentences, just to satisfy the transposition needs. But it's not in a status that initiatives could implement it tomorrow. The relation between renewable energy communities and citizen energy communities is often not defined. It's very much defined separately. Recently, I saw discussions in some countries that citizen energy communities could serve as umbrella for renewable energy communities. We have this discussion in Austria, but it's also being discussed in Ireland, for example. The renewable energy community frameworks mostly focus on electricity. There's no clear framework for heat or sector coupling. And as I mentioned earlier, active consumers are hardly transposed. Another important issue that is being discussed in several countries is that activity should be primarily commercial or professional activities. What does this mean? To what extent is this requirement a non-profit requirement? Some countries, including Austria, have very strict non-profit requirements, and initiatives tell me this is a really big barrier. And I heard from several member countries that they think the national policymakers implement this in a too strict way, and the directive wouldn't see this that strict. So what does non-profit mean? To what extent can profits be made is a question being discussed in several countries. If I look at what the countries did in practice, they tailored renewable self-consumers and renewable energy communities to their specific needs, even deviating from the EU requirements. For example, some countries extended the spatial scope of collective self-consumption, France, Spain, Portugal. Other countries allow third-party ownership in case of renewable energy communities, for example, Austria. I'll give you some examples. France has a collective self-consumption scheme that was extended to 2 kilometers. Has some additional requirements. Facilities should be below 3 megawatts and 0.5 megawatts in non-interconnected areas. And since 2020, in exceptional cases, even 20-kilometer distance is feasible. France has a reduced grid tariff for self-consumption, but there is a limited amount of projects. The reduction is minor. Another example is Spain. The geographical scope for collective self-consumption is 500 meters. There are no grid fees and surcharges for the exchanged energy. Of course, PV is already very profitable in Spain without energy communities or collective self-consumption. If you have a radius of 500 meters, it becomes even more profitable. I give another example. Actually, Belgium has 3 transpositions. Flanders combined collective self-consumption with active consumers. And as I understood it, multiple users or residents can share locally produced energy, store energy, participate in the provision of energy services. This has more the character already of active consumers. Sell energy, including via power purchase agreements, act as service provider of flexibility. And they don't need to be located in one building. So the locations can be at different sites. Brussels Capital has 3 definitions of energy communities: renewable energy communities, citizen energy communities, but a 3rd definition are local energy communities allowing third-party ownership, what is not possible in the first 2 definitions. So the point I'm making here, the provisions don't exactly match the country needs, and countries tailor them to the specific needs. In Austria, we have medium and low voltage energy communities, medium and low voltage RECs, but in practice, it's not very tangible because the area behind the medium voltage and low voltage transformer can be very different in different regions, on the countryside, in cities. Also, communities have difficulties to find out behind which transformer they're located. This information is not publicly available, and it's quite difficult to get it. Also, low voltage areas behind the low voltage transformer may not be aligned with district heating networks. In Austria, we have a large number of small biomass district heating operators, and some of them would like to initiate energy communities, offer PV electricity in addition to biomass heats. But the problem is that the topology of district heating networks doesn't match with the topologies of low voltage grid sections. And still, many energy communities in Austria are emerging. We have at the moment 34 registered one and about 18 in pipeline. They get both. They get a local tariff, so a reduction of the grid tariff that is higher behind the low voltage area than behind the medium voltage area. But also they get many of them get direct subsidies to start up, to form the community. Some conclusions and points for further discussion. The provisions on energy communities are often modified in the member states to consider country needs. The opportunities of active consumer concept is not well understood. Often joint renewable self-consumers and active consumers are merged. In a few examples on active consumers, we see cases where they're restricted to the building level, which must not be the case. Another question is, how many definitions does a country need? For example, in Ireland, collective self-consumption was not transposed, Article 20, because there are no multi-apartment buildings, or there are almost no multi-apartment buildings. This article is just not applicable in Ireland. Another important question is, can definition be merged? Can it be synchronized? On the other hand, do we really fully use the menu of options the clean energy package provides? And I think the concept of active consumers has a big potential that is not yet fully understood. It allows for third-party ownership. It has in principle no boundaries, no spatial boundaries. I'm often contacted by companies that also want to implement collective self-consumption and similar concepts, and tell us the current frameworks are too narrow for business. So a question that we have to discuss later: are the current frameworks that we see too restrictive for companies to scale up? Because importantly, we need energy communities to satisfy specific societal needs. It's about ownership. It's maybe also about mitigating energy poverty. But for a broad transition, we need a range of players, and we need also actors that are able to scale initiatives on a large range. This was my little intro.
Thank you so much, Andreas. Thank you for taking us through this journey, from starting from the very basic concept, what is included in the European directives, and then outlining out of this menu, as you very nicely called it, what are member states picking and for which reason, and what are the impact of those decisions. You pointed out the difficulties in, for example, enabling active consumers initiatives, the fact that maybe those definitions, such as they are now, they have been interpreted, might limit the possibility for some important actor to jump into the picture and support the energy transition overall, such as, for example, the business sector. So thank you so much for that. And I would now give the opportunity for anyone in the audience to ask some burning question before giving the floor to Lynn to tell us a little bit how exactly, starting from this wide picture, we within the site started to discuss about other options, other possibilities, something that can help those other initiatives that are outside of the boundaries. I think that overall, in general, we can observe a difficulty in setting those boundaries, despite the fact that definitions are clearly provided in few instances. But we will see this with Lynn more in depth, and then discuss it afterwards. So this is the moment for everyone has any question what have been presented to get an answer. While you think about the dense presentation of Andreas, I would just ask my colleague Jennifer to pull up the results of the poll that we launched before. The question was, when you heard about collective energy action, what is your reaction? And it seems that we have a good number of people knowing exactly what we are talking about. Let's see during today's discussion whether we actually really agree on what we think collective energy actions are. There are a few people with a general understanding, someone that's tried to imagine, and I'm also happy to see that we have among us who wants to learn more, and we really hope that we can satisfy you. In the meantime, I see that we have a question from Felix, who is asking what is the specific definition of active consumer. Maybe we can have in a very short answer, helping Felix in getting this concept and also the other.
Yeah, I'm happy to share my screen again because I knew this question would come. Nobody knows what active consumers are. Active consumers are final customers or group of jointly, can you see my screen? Yes.
Yes.
Or a group of jointly active final customers who consume or store electricity. So within its premises located with confined boundaries or within other premises. They can sell electricity, participate in markets. So they can do similar things than citizen energy communities. They're like little market actors. And they're entitled to delegate to a third party the management of the installations required for the activities, including installation, operation, data handling, and maintenance. So it's a little electricity market actor.
Thank you so much. I think this was particularly important, exactly because, as you said, is a concept that might have been not that discussed up to now with respect to other definitions.
Yes.
So I see that also Florencio shared a very good news that the government in Spain announced just last week that it will repeal the 500-meter limit between manager and consumer within 1 month time. So very good news, and thank you for sharing. And then I would then pass the floor to Lynn. Josh, I see your hand raised. If you can hold it for the discussion later on, I think we can now get into what we think about collective energy actions. Lynn, over to you. Just 1 second. We are fixing a technical problem, but Lynn, now you should be.
And now I should be able to share as well, I assume. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so as already said in the beginning, we have the Decide project going a bit broader than energy communities and really focusing on what all consumers can contribute to fastening the energy transition. So although we don't really believe in policy papers because we know policymakers generally don't read policy papers, we call it more a position paper to open a bit of discussion. So I'm going to take you through first a bit of what Decide is, and then diving into that collective action concept, if you can call it that way. So Decide was about developing energy communities through informative and collective action. And hence that already indicates that we took the concept of energy communities broader, tending more and more to call it community energy, to make a distinction between energy communities and community energy projects, just to also include all the massive amount of very good examples that do not exactly fit in the definitions. Within the project, we had a number of 7 pilots from the start of the submission. And then we had calls for applicants where another 14 deciders came in. We have also 20 followers and collaborations from Austria, Belgium, France, the Netherlands, Estonia, Germany, Greece, Italy, Hungary, Czechia, Portugal, and Spain. So very well spread over Europe, bringing all what Andreas already identified, had a broad view on the transposition, but also on the social cultural aspects, the way people communicate, what is important for them, where they find each other, these kind of things. As said already, few of those initiatives that we have, the 21, including plus then the 20 followers, there are very little of them that might fit exactly in the definition of renewable energy communities or citizen energy communities. Currently, actually, none of them fits in that definition, but that does not exclude them being extremely important and engaging a large number of end consumers to contribute to that energy transition and also co-own assets. So if we take that broader, then we see that citizen energy, that collective energy actions can include, for example, collective purchase actions like what large companies such as Airbus and Motorola are facilitating for their employees. They connect it to a company, a non-for-profit that is organizing collective purchase actions for PV, for example, having quality checks on that, but also really enabling their employees to join in that energy transition. So that's typically a collective energy action, but it could also be your municipality or your province setting up a collective purchase action for a green energy supply contract or for heat pumps, these kind of things. Energy communities are a subset of that. In energy communities, the aim, of course, is also to collectively, as citizens, join in for that energy transition, but it has more restrictions. And so it reaches probably to a smaller group, while the whole group of consumers, the whole group of citizens is extremely important, that they adapt their behavior, that they adapt their asset portfolio to the extent that, of course, fits them. So if we look at the way we defined energy or collective energy actions, we said it's kind of any energy action that depends on the involvement of the collective of energy consumers and prosumers. So all of them, the collective of energy consumers and prosumers. Their primary purpose is to provide at least environmental and economic benefits for the community or the collective, which does not exclude generating financial profits. So it's not necessarily only a reduction of your energy bill through, for example, increased self-consumption. There is nothing wrong with, by the way, what happens also in a lot of energy communities or cooperatives that pay a dividend to their members. Also, collective energy can do that, but maybe it can do that even a bit further than what a cooperative energy community does. Collective energy actions are effectively controlled by members or stakeholders or by a third party. I can, as a city or a municipality, ask someone else to organize it for me, and put the rules, put the boundaries on the table, but ask someone else to manage it. That third party can then be responsible for coordinating the collective energy action. If the collective energy action is controlled by a private undertaking whose primary commercial or professional activities is in the energy sector, the coordination of the collective action must include a decision majority of representatives from a public body, citizens, or the civil society. So the example I gave earlier, I contact a company that is specialized in setting up the collective energy action, collective purchase action for PV panels, that I put on the table what I say are the rules, which could be, for example, a maximum price or a way of engaging people in poverty. Participation to the collective energy action can be open or membership-based, but that's not necessary, and doesn't have to be geographically limited. So you see it's much broader, and it tries to really cover what is already in the typical concepts, but tries to also cover the concepts that are out there already that do not fit in the more narrow definitions of collective citizen energy communities and renewable energy communities. What we see as a main thing and why we bring this up is that collective energy actions are a bit omitted by the EU funding and policy, making it more difficult for those involved to be informed on how they and their initiatives can support the energy transition. There's a lot of funding going today to energy communities, but there's much less funding going to collective energy actions. Our research shows that the number of initiatives that could be classified under collective energy actions substantially outnumbers both the renewable and the citizen energy communities. Out of the 7 original DECIDE pilots, only 1 could in the future fall under the definition of a renewable energy community. At the same time, we see that the EU's agenda strongly focuses on renewable energy communities and citizen energy communities as an important, but a rather small part of the energy sector and energy transition. And the EU Solar Energy Strategy mentions that the EU and member states should focus on setting up at least one renewable-based energy community in every municipality, ensuring that energy poor and vulnerable consumers have access to solar energy through energy communities, even though we know that access to vulnerable and to energy poor consumers is not what happens in most energy communities, and that the renewable energy communities and the citizen energy communities are not the only way forward to engage citizens in that green energy transition. The Repower EU plan, in addition to what we already have in the Green Deal and the Fit for 55, asks for accelerated implementation of energy savings and energy measures and an increased use of renewable energy sources. In order to achieve that, but it's ambitious, but it's of course necessary, citizen empowerment and involvement of citizens and local stakeholders is essential. Also because there's a lot of private capital that we could really use to enable that transition. The Renewable Energy Directive and the Electricity Market Directive introduced then energy communities, both the renewable and the citizen energy communities, to address what is said above, or what is said earlier, but also to assure that these local stakeholders and citizens have more ways to participate in the energy sector through various initiatives that allow them to effectively control and prioritize what they find important, which could be environmental, economic, social benefits over the typical financial profits. And what we see is what Andrea said earlier, this active consumer is not given the same attention and currently doesn't enable to exploit its full potential. And that is something that is a bit lacking in the way this whole potential of the 2 directives is given attention. So what we want to do with this webinar and with our attention to collective energy actions is recognize that existence of collective energy actions, not asking for it to be implemented in a legislation because there's no need for it. There's no need to recognize it as it's possible in nearly all member states, but to get more recognition of the fact that it is out there, so that in EU research and policy, it can get more attention and enable more divergent implementation of community involvement across EU member states, which integrates existing and emerging initiatives, including energy communities, but not only focusing on them. That would also allow to unlock funding and support for research projects and policy analysis to focus on a wider scope and of these initiatives in the energy sector and be able to really leverage on that private capital of a broad number of citizens that could really help to fasten that energy transition. So that's it. I hope I clarified the earlier question on what do we expect or what do we consider under collective energy action. If there are any questions, I'll give the floor back to Sylvia.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for this great overview. I think it was very dense, very clear, and I really look forward then for the later discussion. Of course, this was the results of our thinking as a project, but we would bounce back our ideas to a great set of panelists before inviting them to comment on what have been just shared, I would like to get the feeling from the audience. So I will ask my colleague to launch the last poll. I know there was a lot of information. Maybe you were already aware of collective energy action, maybe not. But do you see the need for EU-level regulatory recognition of collective energy action? And those brackets are a bit provocative. So feel free to express your point of view based on what you know, what you have experienced, and what you just heard from this great presentation. And why the audience, our colleagues sitting with us today, address this, I would then turn the question to our panelists that I invite to join today in our discussion. So Julia, Ludwig, Lorraine, Tim, and Achille. I will start with Julia maybe to hear from you whether what have been discussed. So we heard Lean presenting a way that we propose in order to capture initiatives that are already ongoing that might not be seeing themselves reflected in the current provided definition. Would, Julia, those panorama reflect on your experience, on your work that you are doing in Spain?
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. Yes, I think we are perfectly in line with what was mentioned, because our experience in Spain is of a, let's say, different format of energy community. So I will present a little bit our format, if you're okay with that. And
briefly.
Yes. So we'll share my screen. Okay, perfect. Okay. Are you seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I just wanted to make a very quick mention to the normative context that was already explained and go through the kilometer zero energy model that we implement here in Spain.
I will kindly ask you to stay in 3 minutes.
Yes, okay, I will be very quick. Just to, it was already mentioned, but just to mention a bit, the citizen energy communities were not adopted in the Spanish normative, while the renewable energy communities were, but the concept was not very developed. So it was just mentioned in the normative, but there was not a very full description of what this means. So in this case, what we think, sorry, I will go a bit quicker, is that there are no clear benefits of creating an energy community according to this definition instead of other formats. So that's why we are developing a different format that doesn't fall within this, this definition. So just to go through a little bit through the model, what we do is that the leader of the initiative is usually the municipality. And so the municipality is who invests and who leads the initiative. Who can participate besides municipal consumptions are family in energy poverty that actually do not pay for the service. So that's how we try to address the energy poverty issue in these communities, and other local families and business that aim to participate. And in general, we have an installation for collective self-consumption that on average is around 50 kilowatt, more or less half for the municipality and half for the other participants. The platform for data management, for aggregation of data, that allows also users to, for example, follow individual consumptions and generation besides the collective ones, and the manager of the energy communities that usually takes care of both administrative and technical aspects, also supporting, for example, individuals in their participation. So that's why we think this goes a bit further, the common, let's say, collective self-consumption, and because it offers even more services. So here are a few details that maybe I won't mention. So just to provide a small scheme of what we do, as you can see, the municipality has the installation on its premises, and then all the consumption can participate as consumers, and the data are managed through a common platform. So in this case, the municipality, as I said, is who invests, and the consumer can participate by paying a fee to the municipality. So only the consumers that are actually involved in the scheme can be affected economically, let's say. Okay, so just to show a few examples, we have some examples. We work with more than 90 municipalities over the region of Catalonia. Here, just a few examples are provided. And the size of municipalities we work with usually are between a few hundreds and a few thousand of inhabitants. So usually are quite small communities. So, okay, so it was, I just tried to accelerate. But
thank you so much. I think it was really nice to see how alternatives are growing. And in your case, this is seeing the participation of the municipalities have been the head of those initiatives. Later on in the discussion, I would like to hear how this project have been designed, for example, with their help. So what actually is the benefit that I see in having this different, slightly different approach. But I would then pass the floor to Ludwig Karg to tell us a little bit what are your reflections on what Lynn presented.
Well, welcome. I'm the one from Germany. I'm the one from Bavaria, and we had a comedian in the 20s of the last century, and he said everything has been said before, but not by me. So I try to not repeat what has been said, and of course I'm pretty much in line with what Lynn said. So the question is not if we need to better involve the society, it is how do we do that? And the real issue there is, I think, that the stakeholders that we are addressing are very different. And by the way, we are starting a huge categorization exercise in some other Horizon projects, but I can talk about that later. What the EC did, and he pointed to that, Andreas pointed to it, they have taken a big step forward with defining the ECs and some other frameworks. But as also has been said, we have a broader view to collective actions. And I don't know, can I share this little picture that I have prepared? I think that would show it a bit.
Yes.
Okay, so I think this shows up. What I try to sketch is a little bit of the various ideas or concepts. What we need is a broader picture. Lynn pointed to that. We need offerings to those that don't want to be involved in governance. We claim that everything has to be governed by the people, by the society, by the consumer, and so on. But many of these people just want to be supplied, and that's it. They maybe need to be involved, for example, in energy efficiency. That's possible, but not so much in supply, maybe. Many want to have the chance to just invest their money and get a return. For those, the model of the existing municipal utilities may be nice enough if these utilities offer such opportunities to invest. And of course, such utilities, and I'm promoting a bit using also the incumbent institutions as a facilitator or catalyst. Of course, they need to come up with many new products, including those that link the consumers together. For example, the utility could aggregate the flexibility of the consumer and bring it to the market. So you know what I want to say. And here in this little picture, I called it other collective energy institutions #1. They are not energy communities as such, but they can support them. Other people would just like to have their own organization and have a say in it, but funding and operating a company is not that easy. If the company should organize energy supply or sharing for its members, it's not getting easier, especially when it's electricity and you have to deal with grids and stuff, which is really tricky at the end. And I can understand to some degree the incumbent energy suppliers when they are a bit anxious about the results of such, let them call, experiments. We definitely need excellent support to such new members of the energy system. And again, it could be the new role of the local and existing competent utilities. I call that in my little picture umbrella organizations. Maybe at the end, these energy communities cannot stay alone. Anyway, I mean, they can never supply themselves and live in autarky. They need to somehow relate to each other. Someone has to take energy from one community to the other. We need maybe umbrellas, and this is not defined yet. My guess would be that the incumbent institutions, the utilities, could take that role at the end, but that is not defined, and let's discuss that. So I would like to stop here. Sylvia, there is more to say, but my pledge is really don't only go for the consumer, the customer, the citizen. Please also do not forget that there have been institutions that supplied them with energy and electricity for dozens of years, and it worked.
Thank you very much, Ludwig, for reminding us what have been already happening, what have been already working, and the fact that probably it might be a good way forward to continue leverage on the expertise that have been taking shape in the ground. I think that you made quite interesting and somehow controversial points by saying that, of course, with those definitions of renewable energy community and citizens energy community, we want people to take stage and to be part of the energy transition as a protagonist. But what if people would just like to be supplied and maybe be supplied by renewable energy, but not necessarily having such a great primary role? With this reflection in mind and a lot of food for thoughts, thank you, Ludwig. And I would ask Lorraine to come into the picture from a slightly different perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Sylvia. Yeah, I definitely agree that in this context of war with the Russian gas cut, we need everyone for the energy transition, that's for sure. But indeed, here I have some concern regarding this this new concept you are proposing. I would like first to defend a bit renewable energy communities and citizen energy communities. Those are not easy concept to grasp, indeed. And why that? This is because we wanted to avoid that businesses, industries try to take the control over those initiatives. And for once, we create such quite an innovative way and means for citizens to participate in the energy transition. Now we are at a quite early stage because this is the beginning. As Andreas mentioned, the transposition process is not complete, not over, not satisfactory, and the way member states are transposing this definition is also not very perfect, I would say. So I must say it's a bit early to say there are not enough renewable energy communities and citizen energy communities on the market. We haven't yet given them a chance to organize themselves, to understand the concept, because indeed it is complicated. Energy systems are complicated. And so I'm afraid that by creating such new concept of collective energy action, which gather both profit and non-profit organization, you would create sort of backdoor for industries to take the control over those concepts that were dedicated to citizens initially. I have nothing against industry. I believe that industry also need to participate in the energy transition, that's for sure. But industries, they have profitability in their mind. Their profitability, in the definition you suggest, you delete the social purpose of such organization. I'm also worried with the fact that all types of energy sources are included there, so there is risk of greenwashing somehow for some industries. Yeah, so I'm just wondering then what is the differences between, for example, a private company which is developing energy efficiency service on the market and another competitor on the market. I'm speaking now from a very legal point of view. I'm just wondering how you would justify to get more funds because you are companies. I mean, if I was a competitor, I would be wondering why my competitor gets some fund because he gathers citizens in his organization, while I'm not gathering citizens, but I'm pursuing the same objective of profitability and business, and I'm also contributing to the energy transition. So those are a bit my question to my my fellow and the audience as well. Yeah, so that's, I do not want to take so much time right now, but those are a bit my first thought about this new concept.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. Very much appreciated. We do love critics. It's just by being criticized that we think we can really fine-tune the concept and test it somehow, whether is it really needed? Maybe it's not, but let's have a talk about that and not trying just to stick with what we already have. We are not by any means attacking the definition of renewable energy community and citizens energy community. Just to be clear, we do fully support those. It's just an attempt to give the same chances to be developed and to participate in the energy transition to other kind of initiatives. But your questions are very well taken. I see that Lynn is writing down, so I'm pretty sure that will be also addressed. But before going into the substance, I would still love to hear the opinion for two other colleagues here joining the panel. So with Tim first, with another hands-on experience from Slovenia. Tim, what do you think about this concept? Does it reflect and respond to your needs?
Good morning, everyone. I think overall, yes. I've been given, it's really helpful that you've laid out the way these renewable and citizen energy communities concepts are playing out at a national level. It varies really widely, right? And a lot of that's about a lot of technical detail. So should we be trying to support community collective energy actions that are potentially more than what meets those definitions? That makes complete sense to me. At the same time, I mean, I guess for me, my understanding is more around talking about community energy action. When communities get together and try and shift their energy systems. So I think for me, that's really important. Are we talking about system shifting initiatives or just system participation initiatives? I don't think a lot of investment and effort really needs to go into supporting Airbus employees to get together and get a better price for their energy through collective buying. I think that's fine, but it doesn't need a whole lot of bad timing. Doesn't need a whole lot of support. I think picking up on Ludwig, the system has worked. It's kind of worked, but it hasn't worked well enough. If we're talking about getting to a world where everyone can live well without breaking the planet, which is where we need to get to, currently our energy systems are still failing to deliver what we need from them. We need the energy services that those systems should provide, and we need those to be done, or those energy services to be provided as cleanly, as efficiently, as securely, and as affordably as possible. And I don't think anywhere do we have our energy systems in that state yet. And I think, to me, what's most important, I guess, about community energy initiatives is they grow out of sort of frustration and picking that fight and saying, well, actually, we can do better. And some of the most exciting community energy initiatives are doing better. And then they're actually sort of dragging the system, in the direction we need to be going. I think you can probably do that under renewable and citizen energy communities structures as these emerge. But I guess what I'm most worried about is capacity for driving these community scale initiatives and doing them well, because it's been mentioned, it's actually really hard. So to your question, should Europe and governments been trying to help initiatives that go beyond these energy communities definitions? Yes, probably. But I think it needs to be a lot more in terms of policies that are helping communities with capacity and doing. So maybe not so much on research funding, but more doing funding. And then in the process, you work out, I mean, I think this chart Ludwig showed of all the different sort of potential definitions is really interesting. You work out where you fit. The policies and the legislation will never be perfect. And part of the journey is that you actually have to battle your way through that. But yeah, in places where there are, as I say, really successful initiatives, they've managed to find a way, but it is really hard work. So how can we boost capacity, particularly in Southeast Europe, where it's really generally very early days. So there's a lot of places where people are sort of like, where do we even start? So if you get very quickly into sort of technicalities of citizen energy communities, that may be more of a hindrance than a help to start with. But it's not so easy to secure funding and resources to do this work well. And I think that's a big gap that needs to be filled.
Thank you so much, team, for sharing your experience and for connecting also with what Ludwig have been saying. That yeah, indeed, as also Lorraine pointed out, this is quite new. Is it the new stages, the uptake in the legal framework? But you rightly mentioned that this might be a very new concept overall, also for the people that are supposed to participate, and this is not always easy to have them on board in first instance, and therefore these other possible settings that are out there might enable the real participation from or everyone, being a little bit more inclusive. I particularly like your doing fundings for doing stuffs, which is indeed from your experience direct what you would support the new initiatives to be taken up. And since you mentioned, it was mentioned before, so the policy aspect, then it's my pleasure to give then stage to our panelist, Achille Henneset, from the Director General for Energy, the European Commission, to give a little bit, to share with us the first reaction on this proposed new concept.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting the Commission for this webinar. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'm very pleased to hear that things are progressing for the energy communities, but that we also take a wider approach potentially to collective energy actions. From DG Ener's side, we certainly do not oppose the acknowledgement of these type of energy actions. I think this was actually already exemplified in the EU solar strategy, which calls for collective solar energy actions to also be encouraged to engage in innovative business models. And that includes collective self-consumption and energy sharing based business models. Now, the action plan on digitalization of energy sector will also reflect similar language. So to some extent, what is being raised here today is already something that is on the radar of the European Commission, and is something that we are willing to also take forward. Now, for the purpose of this webinar, I think it's foremost important to recall the Commission's rationale for defining the energy communities in EU law in the first place. This was to recognize and enable specific types of collective energy actions that are primarily led by smaller, non-professional, local actors with a strong emphasis on citizen control. The conceptualization of these type of energy communities, which we call the renewable and citizen energy communities, was deemed necessary in order to increase their visibility at policy level, but also to link them to an enabling framework that takes into account their limited technical and financial capacities, in order to subsequently help them overcome also the administrative, economic, and regulatory barriers, and as such facilitate a level playing field between traditional commercial market actors and energy communities. So when advocating for a concept or a definition of collective energy actions potentially enshrined in EU legislation, it is important to get an increased insight into the information gaps, but also, and in particular, the barriers they face to engage in activities on relevant energy markets in order to justify the conceptualization. Now, if the sole purpose is to define them, to redirect research and funding towards these types of initiatives and to allow them to engage in similar innovative activities as energy communities, such as microgrid development and collective self-consumption at the local level, it might simply suffice to increase attention for these initiatives, potentially based on the typology provided today here by the side project under Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe, or live calls in the future, and soft law documents such as the EU Solar Strategy, whilst at the same time leveraging and potentially thinking about expanding concepts and frameworks that are already in place in the current EU energy legislation, such as closed distribution networks, and as Andreas has already rightfully outlined, active customers, which is currently not well understood and has not reached its full potential due to more narrow interpretations of the concept in relation to the geographical scope on which they can operate. Thus, based on today's and hopefully future discussions on this topic, I, as a representative of DG Ener, hope to gain an increased understanding of the concrete forms they take and research and innovation or regulatory needs of collective energy actions outside of what already exists under the current Horizon and LIFE program, as well as the current EU Electricity Market and Renewable Energy Directive. Only through feeding in this information, the Commission can take an informed decision on whether it would be justified to subsequently also provide funding and potentially even regulatory assistance to this wider category of collective energy actions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think that actually is great to hear, first of all, such an openness in learning more and continuing being tuned to this, and potentially making use of what is already there if possible, or to find alternative solutions. And indeed, we will continue this work, and I will tell toward the end more about the position paper that we are working on. But exactly to continue the discussion now and going a little bit deeper on this concept. We heard about some criticism raised by Lorraine. So maybe, and I see that their hands is raised again. So I would maybe ask to Lorraine to respond first, and then I'll give the floor to Lynn in order to probably try to address this critical points.
Thank you, Sylvia. Just 2 points. I wanted to add 2 points regarding firstly the recognition of the legal recognition of the collective energy action in the law. You must bear in mind that it takes time to first of all the legislative process and then the transposition, as you have observed for the renewable energy communities and citizen energy communities. It's a long process, so I'm not sure this would be the quicker way to gain recognition for this type of initiative, first of all. And then second, in terms of if the purpose of this the creation of this concept is to attract more financial support, the risk I see as well is that this financial support that is normally that renewable energy communities and citizen energy communities, because they are pure citizen organization, because they lack expertise, because they organize democratic process, they need financial support. And here it will create a category of initiative with profit organization, which are enterprise companies which have competitors on the market, and they will get additional support that renewable energy communities and citizen energy communities deserve maybe more, I would say, because they are not at the same level. And I see also another problematic thing, the fact that we put at the same level, in the same category, profit and non-profit organization, because they are not of the same nature. They do not follow the same objective and aim. So yeah, that was what I want to add, sorry.
Thank you, Laura. And indeed, time is a factor that has to be considered. And Lynn, is it about profit? Is it about putting non-profit and for-profit on the same level?
Yeah, so taking all my notes here, trying to put together what the different speakers say. So first of all, we know that energy communities have a difficult business case. Like Lauren mentioned, the need for funding and financing. By the way, it's not because collective energy actions would get more financing or more funding or more support. That by definition, that is subtracted from something else. Don't say that. Huh? But we observe in all the analysis we see that it is very difficult to make a non-subsidy dependent business case for energy communities. We saw in the beginning of the transposition, when we did all the interviews with the regulators, that a lot of the policy and regulation wanted to have special tariffs, which of course you cannot justify because energy flows aren't going any different because all of a sudden you organize as an energy community. So it's important to understand that luckily that wasn't happening, because otherwise we end up in having different tariffs for whomever comes and asks for it. So the other thing that I want to emphasize, energy communities are not new. There are three big waves that we've observed so far. One was with the oil crisis, what Tim pointed out to. It's a kind of, we can do better. We want to make sure that we have energy, so we do it ourselves. And then you had the second wave when renewable energy came up. And that was when, for example, a lot of the energy communities, 5 to 10, 20 people, typically in Denmark, co-invested in a wind turbine, for example. And that was a win-win-win for society. The government had hence to pay less subsidies than when they would be subsidizing the technology development. The companies felt that the government trusted them, so they continued investing in R&D. And the people got financial profit, and they got financial profit as the first thing. Financial profit is not something we have to judge. Whether someone wants to invest his money in, joining an energy community to get some financial profit, or putting it on a bank and lose these days, or whatever, that's not us to judge. Everyone has to judge for its own what the success is, what the success factor is of the thing he does. So if we jointly set up an energy community, then who is it to say whether we as citizens in our street cannot aim for having a profit? As an example, I had a talk a couple of weeks ago with a large cooperative that's wanted to set up a program for energy sharing on apartments, and they started with a 6% interest rate. And when I asked them why it was so high, because you can get 0% from the government, they said, well, we want to give back 3% of to our members, to our investors. So that is fine. There's no one to judge on what that profit should be. The third wave, by the way, came when the big corporates and the financial crisis started, when people said, we don't want the big corporates anymore, and we want to set it up ourselves. We know from research that an energy community also has to be large enough to be able to professionalize and be able to sustain itself. So I'm the last one to judge whether an energy community has a good, as a good aim or not. The observation simply is that I feel I'm not in the position to judge whether, if 20 people put together some money for a wind turbine and make a profit out of that, I'm the last one to judge whether that's reasonable or not, or justified or not. The point with what we want to do with the collective energy action is not saying profit making. We clearly said also in the slides that it has to be the majority of the voting has to be with public bodies and with citizens. So it's not a profit, it's not a big company that's going to do it. It could be a big company which overcomes the barrier of not having access to that knowledge, but the majority of what's going to be done is with citizens and public entities. So that's important. We also clearly said it has to have an environmental purpose. And then there's the EU taxonomy, to which you can agree or not. But that defines what environmental means. So I think you kind of, and that's okay, yeah. That's why we're here. You kind of pushed it a bit to the boundaries, but that's fine. That's what's needed at this stage. But what we wanted to aim for was going broader. And the other thing that I think is really important to observe is with energy communities so far, with the attention that energy communities or the actions that energy communities are focusing so far, we're not competing in where we can have the best level playing field. And I explained that a bit better. We're trying to compete with an energy community, for example, with PV, in a market that, what Ludwig already has said, has players that are there already for a long time and that are often trying to survive, making the distinction between suppliers and producers of electricity. The ones who are making the profit today are not the suppliers. In Belgium, you even had a number of them going bankrupt because today they have to buy energy at a very high price. Now, if I start an energy community with 5 people here, then I'm becoming a less attractive client for a commercial supplier that has to compensate and has to supply me with everything that I can't get out of the community. And that is normal because they have to buy the energy now at moments that are more expensive to buy it for, because the moments with low prices or the moments that I'm supplying myself now, as a consequence, and there's been sufficient proof for that, as a consequence, we've got the unintended consequences of, but justified consequences of what's happening there. While there's an emerging market where there's much more level playing field opportunities than what the big players can do. And that's the market of flexibility services. So we're all pushing towards, trying to optimize self-consumption, which, by the way, is the worst thing we can do in an energy system that needs flexibility, and trying, to kind of compete in an area where we are dependent of suppliers that have backup power. We are dependent of a lot of market mechanisms that are established and not so easy, as Lauren said, timely to change things. We should be focusing on where we can have a more level playing field. And that is where I feel that we're sometimes focusing too much on the means rather than the goal. The goal is to have a participatory energy system where, what Andrea said earlier, these active consumers can be really a part of the system. And then create an ecosystem where everyone is equally important. And that is, I think, where we have to move to.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you very much. I think you very well touch upon all the points that have been raised. Again, this is not to convert anyone. It's really to discuss to see where weaknesses are and how we can strengthen these. I feel that, yes, there have been some observed criticisms in terms of participation and on having this concept hijacking the space that should be taken by renewable energies. And maybe what you just mentioned, Lynn, the possibility to have the public bodies or community representative in the decision making will kind of limit this risk and still having a profit-based initiatives. I see that time is really already running up. This is always the case when good discussions started. It's never sufficient time. So I asked the colleagues that raised their hand to be very quick and to the point in their comments, but please, of course, Ludwig.
Well, I really support what Lynn said. Recently, we have to take a systemic approach. And what we definitely need is a vision how this future energy system should look like. I mean, can it work, for example, with a bunch of millions of energy communities or collective actions? Is that any better? And I support what Tim said. We have been supplied pretty nicely, but not at its best. So we have to take a systemic approach. And may I give an advice? From listening to all you people, my observation today was we keep talking about consumers, customers, citizens. For the first time, Achille, I heard that we have active customers. I don't even recall that this was mentioned somewhere. So what is it? Maybe we should be a bit more clear with the role of the members of the society. If we call them consumers, they are not going to be providers of energy. They are not going to be participating people. They are not going to be politically active if we call them consumers. And they will never turn into smart or whatever consumers. They stay consumers. And if we call them customers, we admit that somebody else sells energy to the customer. Why don't we a bit more concentrate on calling these people citizens or contributors or game changers or whatsoever? At the beginning, it's a question of terminology. At the end, it's a question of mindset, I think.
Thank you, Ludwig, for mentioning the important part of changing behavior and perception of the people that will have to participate. We have 4 minutes to go, which is a rather short time. So I would like, sorry to keep the people with colleagues with hands raised waiting, but I would like to have a very quick reaction from Julia and team. So you've your experience at hand. You heard about this proposal and the criticisms that might come together. So I would like to have in 1 minute your reaction and how do you see the possible way forward and who are the stakeholders that you will see pushing this way forward? So maybe Julia first.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, actually, I think our perspective, instead of being on the concept of profit, no profit, is more about the concept of having somebody that leads the initiative. Because, for example, what we see is that municipalities have a big knowledge of how all the system works and how to engage, for example, the community. That is something important and has a role in putting people together. So in this case, we see that this really works in the case studies we have, and we think this is important. And another aspect that we notice is that, as I said, in the Spanish normative, there is not a very developed concept of also the energy communities. So in this case, for example, it's not clear to people what's the benefit of creating an energy community instead of, for example, setting a collective self-consumption framework. So in this case, I think it's really important also at the local level to clarify what's the advantage that could be obtained by setting up an energy community, either let's say conventional one, as the normative says, or a different format. Because if not, people will rather go for the collective self-consumption that, for example, is a bit smaller concept than what we meant with offering all the services such as flexibility and so on, like a more active role. So this is our perspective.
Thank you so much, Julia. So supporting and giving someone that could lead and maybe clarifying what are the benefits is what we take from you. And team, in 1 minute.
Always a challenge. I think, I mean, you started with, Sylvia, with definition the session today. And I guess the sort of, I think the question of what should Europe, what should governments, what should we be spending public investment in trying to help in this space? Again, so I would come back to initiatives that are showing, as Ludwig bounced back, that things as good as they could be. I'm not sure I agree with the proposition that we want our energy systems to be so participatory that everyone's involved. I think ideally people just want them to work for them, but it's very clear they're not working. We can see energy companies are making massive profits. That's only coming from us as citizens. It only comes from paying for energy. There's an article yesterday that I think 700 billion of subsidies for fossil fuels still last year. We know that money is going to oligarchies and it's not being reinvested. So people understand, I think, more and more that energy systems are not working for them. They would like them to work for them. I don't think the solution is everybody is involved in making them work, but we definitely need examples of how they can work much, much better at a local scale. So I think, your proposition of, what should we be trying to help? I would just reinforce that. Let's try and help a lot more community scale initiatives that are demonstrating energy systems as good as they can be. And then let's work towards the sort of system shift where business as usual becomes doing things as good as they could be, because that's what we need. If we fail in that, if we fail on energy, which is actually, some of the simplest stuff we have to solve in the coming years, then how on earth are we going to solve some food systems and nature systems and other systems? So let's kind of get energy right quickly. And yeah, let's look for the leaders that are able to sort of demonstrate quickly really, really great examples, and scale out from there.
Thank you so much. So kind of having a double approach, like bottom up, having initiatives that are already ongoing, trying to also fit into, let's say, the possible definition, rather than maybe the other way around, having existing initiative trying to fit themselves in those boxes, together with the businesses that, of course, can also work towards it. I see that we are already 1 minute beyond time, and I hope that you will have just a few minutes still. I would love to have Lorraine, of course, your comment, and then Josh, you have been keeping the hand raised for quite a long time now. So if you can really in 1 minute respond, and then we can close it.
Yes, I just wanted to reply to Lynn's comments. First of all, I'm not judging the profitability aspect of it. It's just that it is two things that are objectively different from a legal point of view. When you have a non-profit organization and a profit organization, this is only what I was raising. So if you want to create one regime,
a SEC or a REC is not by definition non-for-profit. It can be any form. Huh?
Yeah, but the purpose in the definition of REC, they should not pursue a profitable objective. This is really in the directive. REC should not pursue a profitable objective.
Yeah, not their primary objective. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then in terms of environmental purpose, in the definition you suggest, again, I repeat that when you include all types of energy supply, there is risk of greenwashing for certain industry. Just wanted to mention that. And then in terms of, I understand perfectly the purpose of creating and giving value to such initiatives. It is indeed, we need everyone for this energy transition, that's for sure. But again, if you create a competing category of initiative, because even if you say that it's not competing with renewable energy communities, you will have a second category with potentially market players in there. There is a risk. It's not for sure. I'm just raising the concern that there is a risk that market players, private companies, take over the control over this category and even compete with inside the category with a non-profit organization. I'm just raising
why we set
this
the majority
as a lawyer, you see. So yeah, that's only my concern, but yeah.
Just read the slides again. You will see that we did think about it. There is this majority concern in it, so it's tackled on that side.
Of course, the presentation had to be short, so there are way more details. And thank you, Lorraine, for pointing out this risk, which is indeed a risk that we have to keep strongly in mind. Josh, in really 30 seconds, sorry.
I'll try. So many things to respond to. Just a couple of maybe perspectives or that I can share, because I was involved in the drafting of all of the definitions we've already talked about. First, when we started this project, we really started with community energy, and this really covers many different initiatives. So it was really hard. So we had to focus on an economic actor. That's ultimately why we came to the energy community definition. So when we're looking at collective action, I could name several things that aren't included in this, often some of which don't even need a legal entity. Collective switching and energy savings campaigns, those are collective initiatives. So this is something broad. So we need to be really, really specific about what we're defining. One thing I will say is that there is a need for clarification of certain topics. Energy sharing, for instance, this is not something, this is an activity. It's not for energy communities solely. And the fact that it's in that article automatically makes people look to energy communities. So if there is a chapeau sort of categorization that we can create to differentiate what I think already exists with self-consumption and active customers, collectivity is mentioned in both of those. I think we can use those. And if we can clarify these two concepts, I think we could really help make everybody clear about what these mean. So I'm not gonna give a certain judgment as to this definition or what form it should take, but I would certainly acknowledge that clarification is needed. But I would ultimately want to make sure that these two concepts don't cannibalize each other. We focus on energy communities because it is an unknown concept, and that's why it has received a lot of attention. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Josh, for your valuable contribution. I see that Achille has to leave, and so probably many of the colleagues, thank you for staying in the line. And I think that we had a little grasp of the difficult job that Achille and colleagues have been performing in these years, because indeed setting boundaries is never easy. So getting agreement and definition, it means, of course, having someone falling within and someone outside. But I think it was important to have this reflection on what those boundaries that are set now are including and what are excluding, and to see whether those can be kind of validate or maybe rethink or complemented. So this is an open question. I don't think that we provide you with any answer. Probably you are living with a lot more of question marks, but we thought as a DECIDE project that it was very important to have those question marks raised. So I would just quickly share a few details and information. The DECIDE project is, of course, continuing this work. We are going to be present at the USEF, the European Sustainable Energy Week, toward the end of the month. We are in a stand, the ICLE stand there. We are participating in the policy session with part of our work that has to do with the behavior change, so very much linked with what Ludwig said before, as well as we are organizing together with other sister projects a workshop that is digging a little bit deeper in the solar strategy point of having one renewable energy community in each municipality of 1,000 inhabitants above. So you can keep informed on what we do in the website, in the Knowledge Hub, reading our news. We're definitely going to continue our work, and specifically on this topic, we will collect all the information, all the valid inputs that have been provided today, and work on a position paper that you will see published towards the mid of this month. So around the 15th of September, stay tuned, and you will hear more from us on this weird concept. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Ludwig.
Ciao, ciao. Thank you for moderating.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And have a good day.